LawWiser. I know we've been in touch for a while, and I'm so glad that you're on a platform today. So very warm welcome, and actually good morning because you're I understand in Florida, is it? So it's probably morning for you.
Yes, it is. So I'm really glad to be here. I know that this is an important issue for you and how you at LawWiser are bringing this forward.
So Pamela, you're actually the first speaker for our mental health awareness campaign that we're starting, which is called hashtag Let's Get Real, and we're specifically focusing on the legal community. So before we get into this discussion, the first thing is that we would really love for our audience to get to know you, a little more. So if you can just share a bit about your background and how you came to work so closely with lawyers.
Oh, I'd be happy to do that. I'm happy to be here. And when I began, it was over 25 years ago, actually. Lawyers began to come to me and they began referring their colleagues. And all of a sudden, my coaching practice was primarily lawyers. And I didn't really realize at the point, and this was, back in the 90s, that there was some problem that specifically lawyers were experiencing. So what happened is I really honed in. They had all kinds of problems. Some were drinking, some had depression, some were overly stressed. And over the past 25 years, I've written over 250 articles specifically for lawyers. I do have a bi-weekly newsletter on LinkedIn. I just recently authored a book, which will be out in November, which is how to increase communication among the multi-generational law firms. And also the American Bar Association, I was a peer reviewer for their report, which was a breakthrough effort to really get lawyers and law firms on the same page to say this is a critical issue. Lawyers are being overly stressed. Some are taking their own lives. There's a lot of alcoholism, and the legal profession as a whole is at risk. So lawyers come to me, they've already gone to therapy, they've already gone to psychiatrists, they're on medication, and it's still not working. So I have developed a way to help them to navigate their law practice, become productive, to manage the stress and depression, and to find happiness in their life, even though they're having a pressure-driven profession, which is being a lawyer.
Right. So let's actually start from there. I think you mentioned that obviously there are a lot of common things that you would have observed, in what they're feeling and the pressures that they have to navigate, while at work. Since you've been connected to the industry for so much time now, can you help us understand what are some of these common denominators that you've observed, where lawyer well-being is concerned, specifically mental health? Of course, I understand there's physical health, there are spiritual aspects and all of that, but for the purpose of this video, let's talk about mental health.
Yes. Now I have to say this is that I have coached lawyers in Europe, in Asia, and all over everywhere, Australia, different places. So I've seen lawyers and their common denominators. Number one is that I'd say almost like thoroughbred racehorses. They're like really determined and really motivated and ready to race off and do whatever it is that they're supposed to do. But what happens is that there's a lot of comparison and competition among lawyers. So they're concerned about how others perceive them. So they may be really in a lot of pain or stress or whatever, but they're going to put on the front because it's very important to look good. And there's a lot of beating oneself up because they have these high, unachievable expectations of themselves. And even the law firms all contribute to this. And so they're always, beating themselves up. They don't really acknowledge their successes. They always look at what they have done wrong. And so therefore, what happens is there's a lot of anxiety, depression, and a lot of alcoholism, and there's a lot of burnout. And a lot of, unfortunately, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, but there's a lot of lawyers, the only way out they think of is how can I get away? So there's a lot of suicidal ideations among lawyers, more so than other professions.
Pamela, could you, would you be able to share some statistics related to mental health challenges in the legal profession? I mean, whether it's burnout, anxiety, depression,
Mhm.
or or anything else. I think, I mean, all of us know this, but when we actually see the stats, then we actually understand the gravity of the situation. What's the reality on ground?
Right. Yes. Now, Patrick Krill, who who was the one who kind of worked on this report to get all these figures, was the director at Betty Ford, which was focuses primarily on the alcoholism among lawyers. But the statistics are the alcohol abuse, that they might have a problem with alcohol, is about 36% qualify. And the younger, and you would think the older lawyers were the ones who drank the most, but they found out that the lawyers under 30 were a higher statistic than 36 than the older lawyers. And they've also found that law students, problem drinking begins in law school, because to get through the curriculum and to do everything, they have to drink, they find themselves leaning on alcohol. So the 36% of alcoholism. Now, depression is about 28%. Now, when we think about, okay, and I want to really put this in a context, okay? So when I think about a percentage, we know that 36% is based on 100%, right? So if you take a line of 100 lawyers, 36 would step forward and say, I have a problem with drinking. Now, depression is 28%. So you take the same line of 100 lawyers, 28 would step forward and say, I'm suffering from depression. Now, it is actually, these numbers are higher among men and people who have solo practices. Now, stress is 23%. So let's, I like the visual of 100 lawyers, 23 out of that 100 would step forward and say, I'm suffering from stress. Women lawyers have a higher rate of stress than men, and also so do solo practitioners. Now, anxiety is 19%. So that number is higher for women and solo practitioners. So again, we look at that line, 19 women lawyers, 19 lawyers, men and women, would step forward and say, I'm anxious every day. And the final one, which is the most serious, is 11.5% based on suicidal ideation. So what that means is that they don't necessarily, not all of them have the plan. Some of them do. Some of them just I wish I could escape. So 11.5%. So if we just took that at 11% and we said 100 lawyers, 11 would step forward and say, I think about ending my life. You take 500 lawyers, that's 55 lawyers would step forward and said, I have thought about taking my life. I actually talked to someone on the phone. They actually, unfortunately, I don't know if they're alive today because they didn't accept help. But he called me and he said, I felt like I couldn't go on. So he went to the top of a building and he was getting ready to jump. And the only reason that he didn't jump was there were people standing below, and he was too polite to want to jump and spatter his remains all over these people standing there. And that's the only reason he didn't do it. And there are, there's story after story of lawyers that have taken their life. And when you think of how from law school to the infrastructure of being a practicing law, if you think about the expectations and the demands and the pressures, some lawyers think, well, what can I do if I'm not a lawyer? I can't go sell hot dogs. I can't go and work as a security guard. I've got to be a lawyer. And then usually with the lawyer, you have financial obligations, you have a family, you have expenses, you have all those things. And then you feel trapped in this world. And unfortunately, it's too much for some. They don't get help because they're too proud. I just want to say, a common denominator among lawyers is that many of them, and too many, are too proud to go get help because they feel like there's something flawed if they need help, when really the legal profession is one of the top most professions that cause suicidal depression and stress. It's one of the most risky professions in the world.
So, I mean, on this note, I want to ask you, Pamela, I mean, what are some of the red flags before you reach a situation like, the person who you were talking about did? What are some of the red flags that somebody like a lawyer, in fact, anybody can look out for? I thought that would be something really helpful if you can share that before you go today. I know we're going to have more conversations through the week,
Sure.
But for today's conversation, this would be really helpful.
Yes, these are some of the red flags that I have noticed. Now, one is that alcohol is definitely a big one. And they use alcohol to dull their pain or anxiety, or even drugs. I have a client that takes these antidepressants, but they're misusing them. Oh, I woke up today, I feel bad, so I took one of these. This is not how they're prescribed. So, but they'll drink to ease the pain. If you feel depressed, and how that depression will reveal itself is you're unable to concentrate on what you're doing. You feel weary, or exhausted, or hopeless, and you have insomnia, guilt, and you feel worthless. Another is you feel you have a lot of anxiety. Now, anxiety, we will talk a little bit about that. But you're nervous and you're fearful and you're restless. And you might find yourself always having, in the US, they take antacids for their stomach, but digestive problems. Your thoughts take on life on their own. I have a saying that when you wake up and the only thing you think about is how awful it is. I use a colloquial firm statement, ain't it awful? So it's so awful. Everything is so awful. When you feel like everything is so awful and you can't see anything that's good in your life, that means that you have a red flag. Now, you can feel like a lot of pressure, almost like you feel like there's an elephant sitting on your chest. You're having a hard time breathing, your chest may be hurting, or you feel this pressure, or you can have shoulder or neck pain, or you're clenching your jaw, all of that. When you're sitting there, your shoulders are so rigid, you actually can have your back hurting. You can have shortness of breath, fatigue, you're always tired, you're worried, you're fearful. And those are a few things that you're going to say, this is not normal. This isn't how I should spend the rest of my life. I can't do this day in and day out, having these feelings, having these chest pains. One lawyer said, I just went to the emergency room. I think they said it cost them like $6,000 or $7,000, and it was stress. They couldn't find anything physically wrong with him, but it was stress. And so that is what can happen if you are not conscious of your well-being, and it's your responsibility to do that.
Thank you so much, Pamela. That was very helpful. I guess, and this is just in layman terms, I guess, if, consistently I wake up every day and I feel awful. And I mean, I tell myself, I guess I just have to tell myself, this is not normal. This is not how I'm supposed to feel, right? I guess just ask ourselves that question, that is this how I want to feel for, I don't know, the next so many years, or why should you feel like that even for so many days, forget about years. So, I know we're just getting started. We have a lot more to talk about, and we're going to do that soon in our next conversation. But thank you so much for your time today, and have an amazing day.
All right, thank you.